Happy New Year. Hello. Welcome to today's episode of Rainer on Leadership, your online home for leadership lessons and advice for the local church. I'm your host, Sam Rainer. We have also with us the founder and CEO of Church Answers.
Sounds so formal,
my father, the most holy Reverend Dr. Rainer.
Well, you could, my title when I was dean at Southern Seminary, my self-imposed title, the most holy Reverend Dr. Dean Rainer. How's that one?
We can have everyone start calling you that, and I'm sure they'll be glad to call you.
I have a hat that they gave me that has.
I do remember that hat. That does bring back some memories. Was it a red hat with white lettering?
No, that was a blue hat. Don't go there. Do not go there. No. My.
It didn't say "Make Southern Seminary Great Again."
Oh gosh. Okay. Let's move on. Sam, go on and say a few words about Southeastern Seminary, and then we're going to talk about the series we're in.
Yeah, we're very grateful to Southeastern Seminary. They're committed to helping you get the training you need to pursue ministry from anywhere around the world. That's why, for you listeners, they are waiving the application fee for any of the programs that they have. So go check them out at sebts.edu, or you can just Google Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. When you go to the checkout after applying, use the code Church Answers. It's all together, Church Answers, plural. They'll waive the application fee. And here's what I love about Southeastern Seminary. They can equip you to do what God has called you to do. But in going to Southeastern, you will find a seminary that isn't just about theological education, but also ministry preparation. So go check them out at sebts.edu. And we are in part 2 of 3 of a series on church revitalization.
Well, the series is based upon a book that you've written, Church Revitalization Checklist, that I'm saying again and again is going to be a seminal book on church revitalization, church health. I anticipate as more and more people hear about this book, that it is really going to become one of those books that you read the little plugs, deemed to be a classic, must read, don't put this one down, all those things. That's really true for this one, because one of the questions we get, Sam, on any church revitalization or consultation is, now tell me what to do. What are the steps? And you can break them down into methodological steps. And you do that in your book, the Church Revitalization Checklist. We are doing a 3-part series. Last episode related to the series, we talked about hitting the reset button instead of the pause button. I encourage our listeners and those who are viewing on YouTube to go back and listen or watch that particular episode. It'll give you the foundation of what we are talking about here. This is part 2 of 3. Tending to what is most important in church revitalization, the most important things. And I love these items on the checklist, Sam. And we'll go to this first one, because the first one is often the forgotten one, and it's remembering the forgotten facilities. Okay, Church Answers moment. We have a platinum client. Now, platinum client are those who have 24/7 access to us. And you know what we need to do? I hadn't even thought about that. I'm looking at Amy, and I know y'all can't see Amy. Can we put is it possible to put a platinum link on here? Okay, let's do a platinum link. We only accept 25 to 30 platinum clients a year. And this is an opportunity to have 24/7 access to our whole team. There are a whole lot of other benefits to it, but I don't want to have to explain platinum, so I'm going to let you look at it in the link if you have an interest in it. So we have a platinum client from Georgia. I know you talked to him a good bit, Sam, and I did too at our last retreat right outside of Nashville. I don't have permission to say his name, so I'm not going to give his name at this time. But he is talking about both a remodel and possibly a rebuild. And it could be an either or it could be a both and. And here's what I loved about it. He is asking all of the right questions. He is looking at the facility of his church, a rural church in Georgia. He is looking at it with a renewed focus. What is the best thing I need to do with this facility? And so one of the things that often happens in revitalization is we fail to see the facility from the perspective of the outsider, because those of us who are coming in, I mean, can you imagine a church having a carpet that is mauve or purple or
You mean like Bradenton plum?
I didn't. Well, I'm thinking about that.
So
Yeah,
not
that was one of the most nauseating colors. I came into your worship center and wanted to vomit just because I got nauseated looking at the color.
It did make people queasy, and there is a long story behind that color that coincided with a renovation that also included our organ and ultimately resulted in a minor, I won't say a major, but a minor church split. Now, long before my time, many decades ago, but uh, it was a dated color from the very beginning. We'll just say that, and I inherited it. At one point was Bradenton plum, but it became pink, like a just a nasty
It
color
was
of
putrid,
pink.
puking pink.
We have it fixed now. So for if people are thinking, I don't want to go visit their church, it's all we have renovated and it is all fixed. And let me tell you, there's a group that can help with this.
I know who you're talking about. You're talking about
Brown Church
Brown Church
Development Group.
Development Group out of Kearney, Nebraska. Yeah. We're sending people to them, Sam, on a regular basis now to help them with remodeling, building. They have church consultants themselves that can say, here's some first steps you need to take before we start talking about the big expenditures. So that's what I recommended this pastor to. And here's what happened. Let's continue the church answers moment for just a moment. Here's what happened. He emailed Mr. Brown of Brown Church Development, the principal, and within 5 minutes he received a response. They have this huge team, but the head of the organization responded to him. And so the pastor emailed me back. He said, well, that's impressive.
Actually, that is very impressive. And they're good at what they do. And what I love about Brown Church Development Group is they'll tell you what you really need, and they'll help you with the ministry side of your facilities. So if you have carpet that's the color of Bradenton plum, you should give them a
Putrid,
call.
puking pink.
Oh, let me tell you a forgotten facilities story of one of my own. So I was doing research for my dissertation. This was a few years ago at this point. And I was talking to an executive pastor of a large church. It was for research for the dissertation. And this church is a well-known church. If you heard it, you've heard the name, you would know who it is. And I was researching from the perspective of they'd done a lot of good, and was asking the question, what is next? And I loved his response. You know what he said?
Carpet.
We need new carpet. And it made me feel better because at the time we had not replaced our dated pink carpet. And I thought, well, they need new carpet. We need new carpet. But what he said next was what was most shocking. He said, yeah, we got to redo the hallways. It's going to cost $1 million.
Just for the hallways.
Just for the hallways. And I was just like, man, that's a big facility. And the larger facility, I mean, you don't want to forget any facility, but the larger the facility, the more important it is not to forget, that you actually have this thing and to keep up with deferred maintenance.
Well, let me ask. I ask Amy questions, and y'all cannot see her or hear her. She's kind of hidden away on Squadcasts, where in the secret compartment, and we only can. But do we have the facility checklist anymore, Amy? If we have it, can we put a link there? Because we do have a facility checklist. But the best thing to do is if you're looking at a church revitalization, get some outsider to give you perspective of what they see when they see it. You can do it yourself, but if you really think that there's going to be some type of new construction or renovation involved, get the Brown team in there to help you. So Brown Church Development Group is who we love to talk about, but that's a big part of revitalization, Sam, is what is a facility? Looking at it from remember how important it is instead of forgetting that it's not.
Yeah, and the next thing that we want to bring up is something that I think is the fruit of the church growth movement. And
are you about to bash me again?
No, because I think there was more good than bad in the church growth movement.
That's what
Like
people usually say about me. Yeah, it's been more good than
more
bad.
more good than, but there's, as with any movement, there are things to critique. And one of the perspectives that came out of the church growth movement, whether it was intentional or not, was that every church has the potential for unlimited growth, as if every church can just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. When you read the literature, and for my dissertation, I read a lot of books about church growth, including yours, by the way.
Mm.
And and the theme, part of the theme that came out of that was every church should just grow and grow and grow and grow because living things grow. Well, there is a myth. There is a myth of unlimited growth. You can't. Our Southside campus, for instance, which is on like 2 acres, that campus will never be 10,000 people. You literally, physically couldn't put them on the campus, even if you had multiple services, because it's just too small. And I was talking with a pastor today through Church Answers, and we were going over his Know Your Community report, and he was asking questions about what does this mean for my church, which, by the way, we can put a link to the Know Your Community report
Oh,
down
poor
below.
Amy. We're working her to death over here.
I know. It's just like we have
Let
all these
Akeem,
ideas.
Amy, hand that one off to Akeem.
So
Let him.
it's our demographic report at Church Answers, and we were walking through it together. And he said, we're averaging about 200 to 300, and they had some parameters around that. I said, man, you're in a really good spot. It's a stable demographic. It's not a growing demographic, but it's a stable demographic. And I said, if your church does well, then it will, you'll grow by 20, 30, 40, 50 people a year because you have people passing on. You have an older congregation. You're replacing them with newer, younger people. And the point that I want to make is this. You need to focus more on going out than growing big. Do the work of evangelism. Do the work of Acts 1:8. Do the work of the Great Commission. I think God will honor you with growth. It doesn't mean that you have unlimited growth. It doesn't mean that you're going to grow to be the next mega church in the area. If that happens, that's great. Good for you. But I think we need to focus more on the lead side of things instead of the lag side of things, the obedience side of things instead of the
Lead is
fruit
what you do. Lag is the result that
result.
you get.
Yes, let's focus on doing what we're supposed to do and then letting God provide the growth. Because when you focus yourself on growing big, I want to grow big, I want to grow big. Well, I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong with that thought, except for the fact that in order for that to happen, you have to be obedient to the Great Commission. So I think the perspective is you're talking about a tweak here, but I think it's a good one. Let's focus more on going out than growing big.
I do remember in much of the church growth movement, the church that was featured the most was, I believe, Full Gospel Church is the name of it in Seoul, Korea. And it was at the time 120,000 in attendance. And there would be the illustration, look at that church. If they can do it, anybody can do it. Well, so yeah, saw a lot of that. We saw some of that where you were brought up. Southeast Christian having over 20,000 in attendance on one site at the time.
Oh yeah,
Another,
and excellent church, wonderful church, great leaders, good people. But not every church can be that. Not every church should be that.
there's a good point. How about children? Embrace children. Don't just tolerate them. If they're my grandchildren, they don't have to be tolerated. They are totally embraced, loved unconditionally because they are the most incredible people that have ever existed on the planet.
I think you might be just a bit biased. Now, this is something that I definitely bring up in the book, Church Revitalization Checklist. Uh, yeah, there's there's two kinds of restaurants. Let me put it this way: two kinds of restaurants, and every parent of every large family. If you have a large family, then you know this. Um, I have 4 children, sometimes 5 or 6, depending if we're fostering. 11 and under at the time of this recording. All of them are 11 and under. And when my wife and I go into a restaurant, we know automatically before they even seat us if this restaurant appreciates children or is just going to tolerate, if they're going to embrace us as a family, or if it's like, oh, great, here comes a big family with a bunch of little kids. You can feel it. You just know it. And there's no one thing that happens that is the smoking gun that points out, that it's just the restaurant has that culture. And I would say the same of churches. Now, you walk in with a big family, you walk in with your children, and is this church like, we embrace kids? Or it's like, oh, you've got kids. Okay, well, I guess we'll have something for them. And that's a big distinction in church revitalization. You can't just tolerate kids and just have things for them. You have to embrace them. And that means that things are going to be a little messy because children do not eat cleanly. It means that things are going to be a little more noisy because children are not quiet. It means that child protection is important. You're going to have to invest in that. It means investing in KidMin, investing in those who serve in the KidMin area. It means that your children's budget had better be the same size as your worship budget. And I challenge any church that looks at their budget and the children's budget is smaller than the worship budget. I think that's a problem. I think that's one of the most telling things. Look at your financials, look at your budget. If you're spending more on the worship ministry than you are the children's ministry, something is wrong.
Well, and again, on the checklist side, okay, what's the pastor to do? Embrace children. That is a bit theoretical. Don't just tolerate them. One thing is that the pastor can clearly communicate it from the pulpit in different ways about how we love children.
How about you just say that? We embrace children. We don't just tolerate them. I mean, that'd be a wonderful thing to say.
Yes. And anytime a child cries, say, don't worry about it. We love having that child here. We'd rather have a crying child here than not here at all.
Yeah, and actually, we have a lot of families that want their children in our worship services, and that's fine. We also provide children's programming as well. We give parents the option, and many of them want their children with them, which we think is great. And at times, a child will speak out. And my favorite moments, because we do have a lot of kids in our service, is when I'll ask a rhetorical question that's clearly rhetorical, but there's some 4 or 5-year-old that's just that 4 or 5-year-old, and they'll answer out loud like they're at school, and I absolutely love it. And always take that opportunity to walk over to engage that child, speak positively, of course, don't embarrass them at all, and just if they're gonna cry out like that and say Jesus or whatever answer they gave, over there, I'll just say, that's a good answer. That's a good answer, and embrace it, embrace the moment, and not be so worried about the disruption. And I think parents will appreciate that. And honestly, I think it builds a good culture in the church of we train up the next generation. We don't just tolerate them.
I like it. And I have to say, in my leadership ministry in different places, Brad Wagner has answered more rhetorical questions than anybody's ever worked with. So good job, Brad. Good job. All right, how about this third one? Let new believers disturb the peace. Someone becomes a follower of Christ. That person is not going to be sanctified when he or she becomes a new follower of Christ.
There are certain things in people's lives that they know immediately after they accept Christ. The Holy Spirit works, and they know that thing is wrong, whatever that thing is. When you repent, part of accepting Christ is repentance of sin. And, there's an acknowledgement of these things have offended God, and I need Christ to resolve them in my life and heal me and forgive me of them. But a lot of patterns that are in place, a lot of things like, I can't tell you how many new believers I've had to inform them, certain words are not the best words to use.
I told the story about Van. No, about Steve, not about Van. I've told the story about Steve and new believer, and he did not realize that cussing was not part of the sanctification process. And so we actually would have discipleship mentoring moments where I would teach him how not to cuss. Unfortunately, he would describe it as the pastor's teaching me all about cussing.
That's great.
So I had to go behind him and explain, no, not exactly. I'm teaching him not to cuss. I'm teaching him these words. And it started when I put him on. He was the first person ever on our welcome ministry. We never had one before. And I said, Steve, just go out there and be yourself. Be friendly. And some couple came in, first-time guests, just their eyes were wide. And I said, what's going on? He said, do your greeters always say that? And I said, what did he say? And he said, well, how the heck are you? And you can fill in the blank right there. So, yeah.
First impressions training is important, and having people not cuss as guests walk in is important. But that gets to the point that we're making. Church revitalization is going to be messy. And if your church is being revitalized, guess what? You're going to have a lot of new believers. And if you have a lot of new believers, you're just going to have issues. You're going to have issues. And you have to be okay with that. Pastoring is messy. Church leadership is messy. Churches are messy because people are messy. And healthy churches, if you have a lot of new believers, obviously most would say that's a healthy church. A lot of people accepting Christ. That means it's going to be a messy church. Now, this
So
last thing is, go ahead.
This church revitalization, first person comes to Christ, they're going to be different than everybody else in some ways. You have to not only accept it, but you got to embrace it. As they become more and more sanctified followers of Christ, things will change, but you got to accept the messiness on the front end. Now, tell us what you talk when you say this fourth and final, celebrating the right victories.
You become what you celebrate.
There you go.
You become what you celebrate. So whatever culture you want in your church, you have to celebrate those things publicly, from the stage, in your groups, through your communication, on your social media, at your deacons meetings, at your elder board meetings. I mean, one of the things that we do at our staff meeting that I love is we begin our staff. We begin with prayer. We have a time of devotion and prayer. But with the ministry team, the way we begin our meeting is by saying, "Who deserves a thank you?" And someone has to nominate somebody every week. And it's something that points to the culture of the church that we want to have. Sometimes it's a church member, sometimes it's somebody else in the room. But the rule is you tell the story of what they did that week, why it was good. You let them know right then and there, whether you text or whatever, that what they did was great. And then we pray for that person, and we ask God to do more through that person, that others would embrace what they did.
That's great. I love that.
We do that at every meeting. And it gets, sometimes it's a little silly, or what have you, but that's the culture building piece. And we're going to celebrate the things that we want to become. So you have to celebrate the right things. If you end up celebrating the things that you don't want to become because you're trying to pacify someone, let's give them an award, or let's acknowledge them for something. What you're actually do is you're pointing people in the wrong direction. The things that you celebrate are the things that people will say, well, that's important. We need to do that. So find those little victories, find those things, and find those areas in the church where you're like, my church isn't doing a whole lot of good. My whole church needs revitalization. I guarantee you there's something there. Go to that thing, whatever it is, and celebrate it. And if you need to, celebrate it over and over and over again. And if you have absolutely nothing, celebrate the things that are in the past that you're like, I read the church history. I read all the business meetings. 20 years ago, you guys did this, and it was awesome. We need to do something like that again. So even if you have nothing to celebrate, there's probably something in the past to celebrate.
So as a reminder to our listeners and our viewers, we're going through a 3-part series called the Church Revitalization Checklist. As a reminder, Sam has a new and full and complete book called the Church Revitalization. That is called the Church Revitalization Checklist, is it not?
Okay. Yes, I'm glad you've read it.
Well, I have read it, but there are a lot of titles going on in our lives right now.
We're co-publishing books with Tyndale, so I can forgive you a little bit. And you and I have actually written a few books together.
That's right.
They kind of all bleed together. Church Revitalization Checklist.
First episode was hit the reset button, not pause. This one is tending to what's most important. We talked about the facilities, refocusing on those, going out instead of growing big, embracing children, not just tolerating them, new believers, disturbing the peace, and celebrating the right victories. We've got one more that we're going to go in this 3-part series, and you will not want to miss it, he tries to say. We're going to really tie a bow on this whole church revitalization checklist. So we invite you to come back. So once again, Happy New Year to our listeners and our viewers. And always thank you to our sponsors. Sam mentioned Southeastern Seminary. I want to mention Tyndale. A lot of the churches that are in our tribe don't celebrate Lent, don't have a Lenten season. I do like what Tyndale has. And let's just tell you about it. And if you've never done the Lenten season, if it's never been a part of your tradition, you may want to look at it. This Lenten season is your church, our small group, looking for a new and life-changing way to read the Bible. I love this. Give a try to the 40-day Lenten reading plan. And it's in the Immerse, a Bible reading experience. It's a true reading Bible. It takes out distractions like chapters and verses. Don't call me a heretic. They weren't there in the original manuscripts. So it takes them away. And the 40-day reading plan, you can start on Ash Wednesday and read through every book of the New Testament by Easter Sunday. Take 40 days to experience the Bible like never before. Have your church or small group try Immerse for Lent. And we got a website for it. and you can see it in the show notes. It's immerseforlent.com. Get a lot of information. There's a special discount on all the Immerse Messiah books as well. So thank you again for joining us here today on Rainer on Leadership. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe and listen to us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app. And if you're on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe there. If you are on your podcast, give us a rating or review, a good rating or review, and continue to join us online at churchanswers.com, where we are growing healthy churches together.